When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
According to Donald Trump, tariffs are great. And I also want our country to be rich without any negative consequences. So let's sit back and let's watch that economy roar, baby.
Tonight, the stock market dropping more than 600 points.
U.S. stock markets plunged for the second day in a row.
We've seen consumer confidence tank.
Layoff numbers across the U.S. are the highest they've been since 2020.
Wall Street banks are starting to raise a red flag that recession odds have become unsettlingly high.
Republicans have moved into their new talking point. Hey, nobody said this was going to be easy.
There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that.
There's going to be a little bit of pain going into this.
It is going to be painful.
And if I have to pay a little bit more for something, I'm all for it.
We're going to have to suffer through some bad news.
There's going to be a short period of time where there'll be some higher prices on certain products. It's not inflation. That's nonsense.
We might be in for some hard times, but tariffs are Donald Trump's whole thing. And if there's one thing I know about Donald Trump, he's a man who sticks to his guns.
Breaking news into CNN, President Trump's officially delaying tariffs on Mexico and Canada.
Look, I'm not a big business guy, but quick question. Does anyone know if businesses need to make decisions more than 4 hours in advance? So it appears the only silver lining is that at least we're only fighting with Canada and Mexico. You know, if you're going to pick a fight with two sissy countries you can beat. Right? Right? Right?
The Chinese embassy in the U.S. tweeting earlier this week, quote, "If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight to the end."
Oh, shit. China. China don't play. They're like, if you got beef, we got broccoli, bitch. Let's go. Listen, Donald, Canada and Mexico are one thing, but please don't piss off China. I know you wrote The Art of the Deal, but they wrote The Art of War. Okay? And I think a trade war with China might lead to, at best, a devastating economic depression, or at worst, nuclear destruction of most of American cities. Or as Trump might say,
there'll be a little disturbance.
Quiet Riot. Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the support act to our weekday headliner. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex.
It's International Women's Day, Alex.
It is. It is. And what a sunny day it is, too.
I know. We record this on a Saturday, by the way, guys. We don't get up in the middle of the night to put this out for 5 a.m. on a Sunday. I saw that Harriet Harman has been made the UK's first special envoy for women and girls.
I think that's quite richly deserved, really. She has single-handedly done so much to encourage more women into Parliament, including, of course, Kemi Badenoch.
Yep. And her amazing successor in Peckham as the MP is, of course, friend of the show, Miata Fahnbulleh. You know, I know that a lot of people probably feel that it's tough out there if you're a straight white guy, but women do still have huge disadvantage. And we know that democracies with more women in them leading are much more likely to be equal societies and achieve higher economic growth and have less corruption. But at the current rate of 50-50 representation globally, we're not going to get there until 2063. So it's moving, but it's moving slowly. And listeners, if you want an action around all of this, then we suggest you check out 50-50 Parliament's work and sign up to support their campaign. So that's just 50-50 as in the number 5050 parliament.co.uk. They do great work here in the UK, and I'm sure there are plenty of other opportunities to support work internationally around all of this as well.
They're a terrific campaign. I would echo that.
Time for the regular reminder that our content remains free to all of you at the same time, with no restrictions or delays, and access to information we believe should never be locked behind a paywall while lies fill our timelines. But we do rely on the generosity of the people who can afford to support us to do so, to keep us going, and to keep this show free for those who can't afford to pay to play.
And we are so close to long-term sustainability, we can taste it. We are building our own little mobile studio to cut our costs and make sure every penny of your money goes to paying everyone who helps us make this pod, which we have done right from the word go, except ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say,
we will be
the out 3 people.
Yes, we will be the last ones to get paid.
Exactly. So, guys, take a moment while you listen to this to pop over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and become a monthly supporter for as little as £5.
Now, enough with the begging bowl. What shall we talk about today, Naomi?
Well, reform. I know, really disproportionate broadcast coverage, but we're going to have to take a moment to savor the delectable schadenfreude of their current woes. And Alex, I've always said that I think schadenfreude is probably one of the most underrated forms of therapy out there.
Yeah, my middle name is Schadenfreude. And I guess we should also catch up with events across the Atlantic and the latest entirely conflicting shock horror pronouncements coming from the befuddled toxic Whatsit and his chinless Nazi Care Bear.
Sorry, you caught me off guard. Yeah, and I guess if we have time, let's look at a little mini third topic. I think there's some interesting economic or maybe accountancy news happening at a global level.
Yeah, a full slate, so let's crack on.
Quiet Riot.
Now, SpaceX's Starship was not the only Elon Musk-backed prick-like object to experience a rapid, unscheduled disassembly on Friday. Reform UK imploded like a beautiful firework, and the burning debris still raining down on us as we record on Saturday. Naomi, can you give us the potted version of what happened in the last few days?
Alex, with deep, deep pleasure. With deep pleasure. There is a whole history to it that we'll probably get into in a bit, but sort of fast forwarding to the last sort of 48 hours or so. Basically, what's happened is the inevitable, the predictable, when it comes to the deeply authoritarian, worship me or be punished mindset of bullies like Farage. And that has come in the form of one of their MPs for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe, who did an interview in the Daily Mail last week where he basically said that Reform was still a protest party led by the Messiah under Farage's leadership. And he added that Farage needs the right people around him to deliver the goods as party leader. And Farage hit back and he said that Lowe was completely wrong. Reform UK is not, quote, absolutely not a protest party. But, Alex, I didn't hear him correct the bit about being the Messiah.
That's because he's just a naughty boy.
And it all came to a really big crescendo at the end of the week when the party announced it was suspending Lowe from the whip and the party for making threats of physical violence against Chairman Zia Youssef.
And referred him to the police.
Indeed, and for allegations of bullying Lowe's own staff, both in his parliamentary office and his constituency office. Those staff are women, and there is speculation and allegations that he made derogatory comments about them and disabled people. The party is saying that Lowe has failed to comply with a KC-led inquiry. Lowe is saying that is complete nonsense. I have. And the KC agrees with me that no credible evidence has been brought forward. And so, Alex, 5 become 4. Will Lowe go on to reach solo success like Robbie Williams? or end up like Didi Ramone?
I hesitate to ask, but does this mean Reform UK are woke now?
I mean, typically, Alex, I'd have thought that if a Reform UK did make such comments about women and disabled people, they'd be promoted, not fired. So maybe we are now seeing the emergence of a woke Reform UK. Who knew?
This is basically to get at him, right? Because if they were united and someone had alleged from the outside stuff like this, they'd be going, oh, typical media, the woke elites are trying to, they'd be saying all that stuff. So they don't give a hoot.
I think both things can be true.
Yeah.
He may have been awful to his staff and said terrible things, and also be the victim of bullying from within the party because he's dared stand up to Farage over how he runs the party.
Oh, yeah, of course. And his latest exchange with Lee Anderson is very interesting.
Is this on social media?
Yeah, it's on social media. I mean, it's basically a lot of, I thought you used to be my mate. There's a lot of that going on. Lee Anderson has said that, he lies when he says he's cooperated with the investigation, and Lowe is replying saying, I thought you were a straight up guy and I was clearly misled, and this is very disappointing. Do you think this is connected to Musk? If you cast your mind back, I think last December and then in January, Musk promised loads of money to reform, then he withdrew the promise, attacking Farage's leadership earlier in the year, and suggested Lowe would be a better fit.
Well, that's right. And so you had Elon Musk's intervention in January, and he sort of heaped humiliation on Farage, saying he doesn't have what it takes to lead the party. And instead, he then, as you say, praised Rupert Lowe, saying, I've not met him.
This was over the grooming gang stuff, right?
This was over the grooming gang. He goes, I haven't met him, but his statements online that I have read so far make a lot of sense. And I imagine this emboldened Lowe, this endorsement from such a powerful figure. And he then ramps up his pressure on Farage to improve party governance and structures. And he said, it needs to be reformed from top to bottom. And so there's clearly been loads of internal wranglings over how Farage was running the party that then built up to him doing this Daily Mail interview. But when we think about the fissures and the cleaves that can be cracked open within the Reform UK party, we need to go back over a year. And you had former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, who listeners may know as a former Tory donor, who then, as deeply Eurosceptic, didn't think Brexit had been done enough and defected over to the Brexit Party that then became Reform UK. And he became deputy leader of Reform. And he started to raise concerns about how Nigel was running the party, claiming it was too centralised, it was like a vice-like grip of the leader. And it sounds as though he really disapproved of it being a limited company rather than a formal political party. Post-general election, Farage then, of course, doesn't like dissent, doesn't like criticism, replaces Habib as deputy leader with Richard Tice, and then Zia Youssef gets brought in as chairman. And this ultimately leads to Habib quitting the party last year, saying that the new constitution wasn't good enough. He felt it had probably had almost zero legal input into its drafting, and therefore is insufficient when it comes to good governance of the party. And he's not afraid of taking to the airwaves to make his criticisms known too. And so, Alex, have you been keeping an eye on what Habib has done in the last 24 hours? Presumably he's totally aligned with Lowe on this.
Yeah, he's supported Lowe. He has supported Lowe. So it is really quite extraordinary, considering we're just talking about 5-6 guys here. I mean, this is displaying signs of internal fissures that we tend to see in the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, that have hundreds of MPs and thousands of party activists in
and
local...
hundreds of thousands of members.
Yeah, and this is just 5 guys arguing about who's going to sit in the driver's seat. And it's just extraordinary. Can I throw something to titillate you out there?
Please.
Do you remember that there were sustained and quite credible, I would say, rumors that Musk had some British-based help from Dominic Cummings?
Oh, yes. There was plenty of speculation about that.
It occurs to me that someone like Rupert Lowe would simply not be on the radar of Elon Musk unless there is someone with detailed knowledge of British politics sort of advising him. So I just wonder what's going on there, but I guess we won't know.
Quiet Riot. Today's episode is sponsored by the wonderful people at Shopify. Alex, do you recognise that sound?
I can't say that I do.
Well, it is the sound of a sale on Shopify. I've been using Shopify for years to power the Best for Britain shop, and it's got me thinking that we definitely need to use Shopify for selling Quiet Riot merch.
Oh, and we're getting there, aren't we? We're very close to getting our first Quiet Riot merchandise up and running. I've seen some early designs. It feels like everyone but me has a side hustle nowadays. I don't even have a Substack.
Exactly. And Shopify, it just sort of like takes all of the hassle out of selling things. I don't know what we'd do without it at Best for Britain, because it's an all-in-one commerce platform. You don't need to learn any tricky coding or faff around with the back end of your website. It's very much plug and play, and it just works. And it means that you can just get on with selling things quickly, easily, and cost effectively.
I mean, for a small company like us, there's only the three of us. That's me sold, because the last thing I want to be doing is trying to manage yet another process. And I like the idea that Shopify can help you get selling across other marketplaces like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, not just your own site. Because I think that actually there is the potential for our merchandise to go viral. You know, I really feel it in my bones, especially our range of Christmas jumpers. I think they will do very, very well. Plus, I hear that, unlike us, Shopify have won awards. And with an extensive business course library, they're just there ready to support a business in every way they need.
Quiet Riot listeners, Shopify want to help you to get selling as well. So they've got an incredible deal. You can sign up for a £1 only trial month at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot. That's all lowercase.
So go to shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot to take your business to the next level today.
Quiet Riot.
You'll remember from my episode that I recorded with Will Hayward on Wales last week that this is all of a piece in the party. You know, they don't want anything to disrupt brand Farage. And this manifests in Wales by the party not having a Welsh leader.
I mean, I found that astonishing. Listeners should go and listen to that full episode, because I find Welsh politics, like the more I hear about it, the more I think it is a microcosm of a lot of stuff that's playing out on the national stage. But because it's more petite, it's easier to observe the pieces moving around the chessboard. So I found it incredibly interesting. And I would suggest people go back and listen to that and then dive back into this episode. So tell people what they're doing in Wales.
Well, essentially what they're doing in Wales is rather well. And rather like the UKIP party before it, are making some quite significant polling progress, and notably in areas closer to the English border. This means that they're pretty much neck and neck in the polls a year out from the Senedd elections in 2026 with Plaid Cymru and Labour. They're all hovering around the mid-20s. And because of the proportionate voting system, it could well be that they end up being able to form, if not outright government, coalition government, and being in a position to take on the role of First Minister. And so voters are quite rightly asking, okay, so which of your candidates would be First Minister? Who is the leader of Reform UK in Wales? To which they've said, no, vote us in And if we win, then we'll choose from among our number who we would put forward to be First Minister, which is just an extraordinary thing to be saying to voters this far out from an election.
So you will be voting for a First Minister that you don't know who.
Exactly. And when challenged on this, Lee Anderson, Chief Whip of the party in Westminster, said to Will Hayward, we're only really supporting our candidates here as a platform for the general election in Westminster in 2029 to help get Farage into number 10 and be Prime Minister. I mean, he says the quiet part out loud. So he, in some senses, it's very refreshing to get such honesty from politicians.
Yeah, I guess.
But I can't see that it's going to help them the closer they get to polling day itself. They're going to have to change that position.
And can I just refresh people's memory that this all played out also in 2018, where they ousted Neil Hamilton as the Welsh leader of UKIP. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. Yeah.
Particular episode, where again the same thing happened. So, I mean, a pattern is emerging of a Farage cult that will not brook any kind of criticism or attempt to delegate power, basically. I don't think necessarily that's an unfair reading of the situation by Farage, by the way. Those parties do well when Farage is involved and don't do well when he's not. That much is evident. He is those parties.
But to have a large-scale success, you need to build a movement.
But he can't, exactly.
You have to build a movement. You have to bring people with you. You have to make them feel enfranchised in the decision-making processes. And ultimately, you have to take different advice from different people and flex your strategy. And it cannot all be determined by one person and be successful. That is just not how any organisation works, least of all political parties.
And it's not only in Wales that they're doing this, by the way. They're doing exactly the same thing in Scotland. They don't have a leader in Scotland. And again, they're trying to project this notion that they're a national party and, they will only elect a leader when it becomes relevant. But to do that, you have to have a bit of local knowledge. So Richard Tice went to Scotland to launch their sort of Scottish campaign.
I cannot imagine he's a particularly welcome figure in Scotland.
Well, he was using the announcement of a couple of councillors defecting to their party as a sort of springboard. And this is how it went.
Who are your defectors today and where are they from?
So we've got I've got John and Ross, and they are from.
Names? I don't know John and Ross.
Are you going to challenge me on everything, or are you going to ask a policy question?
On that.
Well, I'm answering policy questions.
What are their surnames?
I'm asking policy questions about how we make people better.
My question.
Good.
My choice of question.
And John and Ross.
To you is what are their full
John
names?
And Ross.
And what councils are they from?
John and Ross.
What councils are they from?
Next question.
You cannot tell me who your council defectors are today. Why not? Do you know anything about Scottish politics? You can't even name your own members up here.
We've got 10,000 members. I don't know all 10,000 members.
You don't know their surnames. We called a press conference for these guys and you can't even tell me their names.
Good on that journalist. Good on that journalist.
I mean,
Bravo.
if you call a press conference, Jesus, know what councils these people come from at the very least. Otherwise, you're just displaying contempt, really, for Scottish voters. The other thing I found very, very amusing is that neither of the two people who were standing right next to Richard Tice stepped forward at any point to save him and say, I am so-and-so from X council. They could have done that at any point and just nipped
Could
this
have got
in
him
the
out
bud.
of a sticky wicket he was in.
Just let him drown. Can I ask a question to round this off? Do you think reform have peaked too soon? What do I mean by that? Timing is sort of everything, right? By being ahead so quickly in some polls, so this is the flip side of Labour getting almost no honeymoon. By being suddenly ahead in some polls, people have started to take them more seriously than a protest party. They've started to question them about policies, and they've started to look at their party structure, and they've started to look at people beyond Nigel Farage. And they don't have anything in place yet to be anything more than a protest party. So could this be their ceiling?
This is an excellent question. I want to say that I hope so, but cautious optimism as ever. And what is very interesting that we found at Best of Britain, where we monitor extremely closely, lots of different groupings on social media, particularly Facebook groups and things like that, where very anti-European conversations take place, and we kind of monitor what they're all talking about, what they're reacting to, which issues they're seizing on. And we've noticed in the last week quite a big shift in tone and the comments sections. So these groups, which, look, may or may not have Russian actors involved in them, trying to disrupt British politics, and so division, started posting quite a few cartoons of Zelensky that were not flattering of him and were designed to humiliate him. And off the back of everything that happened in the White House last week, the comment sections have changed, and people have started saying, that's awful. Who's running this page? Who's really behind this Facebook group? And Farage has, not been out and proud with his pro-Trump message this week in the way he has previously. And I do think that his links to Trump in particular that are very overt, and his slightly less overt praise of Putin in the past, is now beginning to make people question.
Yeah, I'll drop a link to the little special that I did a few months ago of all the stuff he said about Putin before, for people to listen to. It's only 9 minutes. It's basically a highlights collection of what he said and when he said it, because he's making a very active effort to rewrite that history and say that I never said it after he annexed Crimea. I always suggested it's in the European Parliament. He's basically trying to rewrite his relationship with Putin. And I've gathered all the receipts in one place for people.
And we can't not then mention ever so briefly in the context of all of this, the story that broke yesterday about 3 Bulgarians arrested for spying on behalf of Russia. And why do I mention this? Well, it took place in Great Yarmouth. That's where the place that they'd been sort of found to be buffing was it, and that of course is Rupert Oates' seat. And normally the MP would be apprised of it all and be kind of part of the comms messaging as to what had happened and what the next steps were going to be. And Lowe, of course, was completely tied up with all of the scandal around his losing the whip and his suspension from Reform UK. And would our security services feel safe telling a Reform UK MP about spying by a foreign actor in their constituency? I don't know. But I think that, that's all just very interesting. We don't know anything, but we'll be keeping an eye on that as it emerges.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock. Quiet Riot.
Now, Alex, inevitably turning our attentions back to the White House. Since we recorded the main show this week, Trump has U-turned on Mexican and Canadian tariffs. And I saw a funny thing on social media. Somebody has said, oh, look, he's definitely putting the if into tariffs. And then an FT journalist quote tweeted and went, I think he's putting the FFS into tariffs. I thought it was very good.
That's very funny.
Trump's still threatening to reinstate, to extend them to the EU. He has said he's strongly considering sanctions on Russia. But with one hand he gives and the other he takes away. He has also limited Ukraine's access to American satellite imagery. And of course, is pausing military and intelligence aid. Cue, therefore, Putin launching another massive attack on Ukraine in the last 48 hours, with Russian strikes killing more than a dozen Ukrainians during a bombardment on Donetsk and Kharkiv. So it really does feel like, Trump's trying to bully both sides into submission to his ridiculous peace plan. And again, just failing to realize how far apart both sides in the conflict are from reaching a negotiated settlement. Alex, I've got so much to ask you about all of this. Trump accepts that Russia is pressing its advantage. He says they are doing what anyone would do. But hasn't he just handed them that advantage with everything he's done to his
and still is.
Support? So what explains it?
I mean, one thing that explains it, of course, is the theory that he's a Russian asset, which at this point I don't think can be ignored, right?
Or at least massively they have massive compromise on him.
Yes. Or a theory with a similar outcome, I guess, that is less clandestine, which suggests that their objectives align. Basically, Trump sees the world as split into three spheres of influence: America, Russia and China, and he wants China to limit itself to its neck of the woods. And that's why he is making such aggressive overtures towards Canada and Greenland and Mexico and Panama, because he thinks that America's sphere of influence should expand from its own patch to all of North and Central America. And then he's basically handing Europe to Putin. He's saying, you can do what you want here. I don't mean he's suggesting that Putin should take over Europe, but he's saying basically, this is not my problem. And that has the same outcome.
But he couldn't also resist seeing a bit of an opportunity to get rare earth and other minerals, and I'm pretty sure desperately wants that because, American economy not looking as good as it was. And he knows that people will judge him on whether or not the price of eggs comes down. And I just can't help but think that it is just a man who fails to understand much other than you've got this and I want it and I've got a thing that might help you out. So why haven't we reached a deal?
Yeah.
And the sanctions on Russia and the withdrawing of support for Ukraine, I think in his head is just a very rational bullying threat you make to them to get them to do the thing that you want. And we're not in a business deal. This isn't a game of The Apprentice.
I want people to listen to this bit of analysis by David Frum, because I think it goes a long way to explaining not why this White House is doing what it's doing, but why the tone towards Zelensky is so visceral.
MAGA is the celebration of male grievance. It's this cult of manhood. But in fact, the people around Trump are cowardly, contemptible people. And they're soft. They steal. They get rich in corrupt ways. And then they're confronted with the Zelensky we saw in February of 2022. With this extraordinary act of personal courage, the Russians coming to his capital, he's offered exit by an evacuation, and he refuses. And he says, we will win this war or I will die in the ruins of my capital city. I think he just shames them. He just shames them. Every time J.D. Vance looks at Zelensky, he sees a better man. And he hates it because at some level, if you're a J.D. Vance, you have to know what you are. You have to know you're a troll, you're a bully, you're just a lesser person. And here is the bravest leader in the world. If he's not what they say he is, what are they?
I agree. And I had that sort of same emotional reaction to watching the three European leaders of Macron, Starmer and Zelensky go to the White House last week. The contrast of the obviously performative Macron, Starmer, coddling this toddler and encouraging him almost in a sort of parental, yes, darling, yes, you're you're the best. Oh, haven't you been a good boy at school today? Yes. Oh, here's a lovely invitation. Patting him on the shoulder, laughing at his jokes in an overly insincere way, stood in such contrast to the man that then was like, I'm not playing games, I'm not playing cards, you're wrong, they're screwing me over, they're the aggressor, you've got to come to the table on this. It really did stand out to me that triggered them, the not playing the game that the other two had. Because he can't, right? He can't. This is a man battle weary after, years of his country being invaded and so many of his people lost. And this huge fear that they all have that Putin will go further and not necessarily stop at Ukraine. So I agree with you. I saw them be triggered by that. When you rewatch it as we've both done, they cannot stand this man coming to them and being, and I don't like using the words manly, especially not on International Women's Week, but a strong man being a strong man to strong men. They hated it.
Zelensky also has a domestic audience, okay, who have been fighting for 3 years now on pure spirit, on the pure notion that they might be small, but they are indomitable. So he can't turn around and betray that. The morale effect back home on people, on the troops on the front line would be catastrophic for him to sit there and accept that, yes, they started this war rather than Russia. So it's a mess. Now, Trump is saying he's considering large-scale financial sanctions, but is there much that the Biden administration wasn't already doing? I mean, I don't know that there is.
I don't think so. As ever with Trump, we don't know. He can change his mind.
I have to say,
the second of the day.
He's backing away from a lot of stuff at the moment.
Well, indeed, not.
He's in reverse. Yeah, I mean, because the economic news has not been great recently. It's really beginning to turn. I mean, if you look at the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones and US dollar to euro, US dollar to pound, I mean, it is just a sharp downward on every
Alex,
single thing.
You're dead right to point that out. And I again come back to the point I was making earlier. I don't think that he doesn't understand the impact that tariffs can have. I just think he believed the threat of them would get the outcome he wanted, which was to get them to do his bidding, to bend the knee to become the 51st state, to give him control of Panama, whatever. So I don't think that he doesn't understand that a tariff would have a domestic impact on his economy, that it wouldn't just hurt the person selling goods to you. I think it's that he thought, they'll so hate any kind of trade war, they'll give me what I want on the other stuff. Yeah. And he's fast finding out he's not quite as powerful internationally as he hoped he would be, and is backing down. But I think there's not just U-turns happening on policy announcements. I think there might be stuff happening in terms of the internal structures of government.
Definitely.
And flying under the radar is something that he's done with Musk's job title. Can you give us a bit more detail on that?
So they had a cabinet meeting on Thursday, and apparently it degenerated into an absolute shit show, especially between Musk and Marco Rubio, Musk and the Secretary of Transport, and even Hegseth, where Musk was basically accusing them of not finding enough savings, not firing enough people, was driving his sort of Doge agenda. And reports are that Trump sat there and listened to this extraordinary ripping each other to shreds for 20 minutes. And in the end suggested that Musk was right, that we need to all be cutting much more zealously, but that he said that from now on, each Secretary of State will be in charge of cuts in their department, and Musk will act in an advisory-only role.
Oh, that is demotion, no?
Yeah. Doge doesn't have any staff. Doge didn't exist as a department before Musk. Its entire power depends on its being able to impose itself on other departments. And so to turn around and say, well, you can advise, but they will then do what they think is right, it downgrades him from presumptive vice president to business consultant. It's not just a demotion, it's a sort of major one.
Humiliation.
Yeah.
And how do you expect Musk to take this? Will he hang
not
about?
Well.
Or
not well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And you're also getting some quite weird stuff happening with crypto. Where Trump had suggested that the Fed should have a sort of crypto reserve. But he's now being attacked by crypto people, even though this had the big backing from Musk. But now crypto people are turning against him. And I wonder if that is part of those ructions going on underneath. Why are crypto people now suddenly criticizing this?
Well, my read on it is that the crypto people all went long on various different coins because they were misinterpreting what the US Treasury was going to do. They thought US Treasury was about to start buying them in bulk. But in fact, the Treasury just said they would hold a reserve of confiscated crypto. And there is a lot of confiscated crypto because it's used mostly for crime.
And I guess there might be some slightly more crypto purists among them, I guess, who see crypto as standing apart from the scrutiny of government, as standing apart from central banks and Federal Reserves and all of that, and resent in principle the idea of bringing it into the system, of making it just another currency with a paper trail, I guess. Just to quickly recap what's been going on this side of the Atlantic, there was a summit of EU leaders in Brussels on Thursday. They announced plans to borrow really an extraordinary amount of money, 150 billion euros, to lend to EU governments, specifically for defense spending. And there's been a little bit of talk about nuclear deterrence as well that you noticed.
Yeah, Donald Tusk,
What's Tusk saying? Because I know Macron was saying we should discuss extending the umbrella of the French deterrent across Europe. What's Tusk saying?
So Tusk did an announcement yesterday saying that he wants to massively increase the size of the Polish armed forces, not through a return to conscription, but a plan by the end of the year for all healthy men of fighting age to be trained in military matters, and saying that, as a matter of security, of deterrent, that we need to build up nuclear capability, nuclear armaments. And it sounds like you've got some of the Baltic states also beginning to consider this kind of thing. Yeah, nuclear proliferation as a consequence of everything Trump has done, which is, for those concerned about such things, deeply, deeply worrying.
Literally going backwards, aren't we?
Literally going backwards. And, can't knock it, because what else are you meant to do? We've got to keep Europe safe and secure, and we've got to become the leaders of the free world.
Quiet Riot. Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Quiet Riot.
Alex, you spotted a little bit of, as I mentioned in the intro, accounting change, courtesy of the UN, a change to how a country might measure its assets and therefore the total size of its economy. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so the UN has just agreed a change in how GDP, gross domestic product, will be calculated from 2030 onwards. Now, GDP is seen as the measure, basically, of the size of an economy. And what they're saying is they will start taking into account the economic value of wind, wave, solar. I don't mean unconverted. They're not going to start saying Mexico is a really sunny country, so we're going to. So it's got a double GDP. They're looking at turbines and solar farms and things like that. And they're saying this is now a reliable enough across a year method of generating energy. And if we take into account things like oil reserves that are being tapped, there is no logic to not taking into account things like this. For instance, Norway has just giant hydroelectric power installations at the moment, taking advantage of the tides in the fjords. And I suspect it's also as a way to encourage investment in these areas, because you're throwing money that will show on your balance sheet. So there is a rationale to it. The equally interesting thing, data. the economic value of data will begin to be taken into account. Not just the installations, the servers, the companies, but the data itself. That will count as an asset. And why not? It certainly counts as an asset for tech companies that deal in it. For instance, the anonymized patient data of the NHS, we've heard for a long time that is of huge value to someone that wants to do research into patient behavior in this area, for instance.
Or someone that wants to do a free trade agreement with the UK.
But the point is it has an economic value. Plainly, it is an asset. So, yes, it is accounting rather than a substantial change, but it does have real-life consequences. People have tended to dismiss it by saying, well, it doesn't change in any way what we had versus what we have after the change. But think of all the expenditure that we calculate as a percentage of GDP, right? Like very recently in the news, defense spending calculated as a percentage of GDP, international aid calculated as a percentage of GDP. So if suddenly your GDP from 2030 onwards goes pop, then so will those commitments. And I suspect governments will have to do a little bit of managing in the next 5 years before the change comes in to maybe change those things into absolute inflation-adjusted amounts rather than percentages and things of that kind. But on the flip side, if you look at the fiscal rules, there's a lot of stuff that we anchor on GDP.
So it's giving you more assets against which you can leverage.
Yeah, how much a government can borrow is expressed as a percentage of GDP, whether debt is falling at the end of 5 years. And I wonder, so the OBR said these changes, they don't have time to put them in their March forecast, but I will be very interested to look at the autumn ones, because it could be that suddenly Rachel Reeves ends up with quite a lot of headroom 5 years down the line, which is the point that matters, right?
Yep.
It's always whether debt is falling 5 years down the line. So she could suddenly find herself with quite a lot of headroom because as a percentage of GDP, debt will suddenly look as if it's falling. So it's
fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting, geeky little thing to look at.
And of course, we've got the OBR review of the forthcoming spring statement and the projections for the economy in the next few days. And doubtless we'll be poring over those in an episode very soon.
And we've got Vicky Price coming back for the episode on the day of the spring statement to discuss it all with us. So, right, that's enough. I think I love how we were chatting before and we said, this can be a short one. It doesn't,
half an hour tops.
Yeah, half an hour tops, they said, having recorded 40 odd minutes. But listen, I've got loads of Podyssey to be getting on with. I'm editing at the moment, so we'd best wrap things up. Oh, by the way, the links for subscribing to Podyssey are in the show notes. And you should subscribe because the first episode is now 6 sleeps away. So, Rioters, thank you so much for lending us your ears again this Sunday. And please do head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod if you're able to help.
Yep. Thank you all for tuning in. And if you need a different way to help us, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment and visit our bookshop. We'll be back on Tuesday with an All Ireland special and with the regular show on Thursday.
Now go outside, enjoy the spring sunshine, do some gardening, do some pruning before all this sap goes up from the roots and then you can't do it anymore. And we'll see you again very, very soon. Love you lots and lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Ooh, right.
Right. Such a beautiful day.
Such a gorgeous day for us to be stuck inside doing nothing but podcasts.